first passage from the set, and here we're looking at a literature passage. Let's dive right in. In the 1980s, there's a proliferation of poetry, of short stories, and of novels published by women of Latin American descent in the United States. Okay, by the end of the decade, so that would be late 80s, towards the 90s, another genre of Latino writing, the autobiography, also came into prominence. Okay, so yeah, that's different. We were talking about poetry, short stories, novels, and now we're talking about different genre, autobiography. You writing the story of yourself. And that came into prominence with the publication of 3 notable books, and then it's just 1, 2, 3 by 1, 2, 3 authors. Okay, so I'm not quite sure what to make of this at the end of the first paragraph. I guess, is it just background? Is it context? See, you actually can't, you don't know. That's the thing when you try to make a low resolution summary, which of course that's the thing you should do after reading the paragraph. You might just want to hold off because you could write something like background here, right? But let's keep reading. Maybe after reading the second paragraph, maybe even a little bit of the third, it'll become clear what the point of this is. These collections are innovative at many levels. Okay, so these 3 works. It seems to me like this might be the main subject now, because they're saying these three works are innovative, many levels. How so? They confront traditional linguistic boundaries by using a mix of English and Spanish. Okay, so I guess that was, we're talking about decades ago. I'm thinking, is that so innovative? Right? Because I'm like, I feel like I've read novels, but this is a long time ago, so maybe it was innovative back then. Well, you have to take their word for it. It was innovative back then. And they each address the politics of multiple cultural identities by exploring the interrelationships among such factors as ethnicity, gender, and language. Yeah, okay, that's cool. I'm just going to put a big question mark here because I don't know what this means. But this is also something innovative, right? So here they did something innovative, mixing up languages. Here they did something innovative about this. And then lastly, this effort manifests itself in the generically mixed structures of these works. Here, this word generically, let's keep reading, which combine essays, sketches, short stories, poems, journal entries, without for the most part giving preference to any of these modes of presentation. See, I think here when they say generically, they mean like generically. Right, like it's in generic, it's in referring to different genres, like mixing up of different genres, like the essay, the poem, the short story, you see, which they kind of talked about here as being different genres from the autobiography. This is truly interesting, or at least strange, you can say, or at least different, because you don't expect to open up an autobiography and then encounter sketches, for real sketches, right? Journal entries, short stories, poems. So this is like 1, 2, 3 points of innovation. So now I think I have enough to go on for the low res. This paragraph, I'm just going to write innovation. And this one over here, I'm just going to write autobiographies. Okay, so now for the connection, first paragraph introduces 3 autobiographies. This is let's go a little high res. Specifically, 3 autobiographies written by women of Latin American descent, and these are the 3. We're barely clued in onto something about them being important, but we don't know what. That's what the second paragraph tells us. They're really innovative. Okay, and in 1, 2, 3 places they were innovative. Let's read on. Let's find out more. So the third paragraph begins by talking specifically about one of these autobiographies, Borderlands. That's this one, the last one mentioned. Borderlands presents Anzaldúa presents her personal history and the history of the Mexican-American community to which she belongs by juxtaposing narrative sequence and poetry. Okay, so there's, it's almost like here, if you don't believe me that they're innovative, let me give you, here's one example. Example number 1 with Borderlands, which we mentioned above. See, she here uses poetry and narrative sequence and mixes them together. Okay, so you can see that this is like generically mixed, right? 2 different genres. Moraga's Loving in the Warriors is likewise characterized by a mix of genres. So here's number 2, e.g. Second example, this person's book, autobiography, was also mixing genres. As she states in her introduction, the events of her life story are not arranged chronologically, but rather in terms of her political development. Okay, so that's also different. This is an additional point of difference of something you might not expect from a autobiography, that it's not arranged in chronological order, which is presumably you read an autobiography, you expect it to be in chronological order. But she said, no, hers isn't in chronological order, but rather by political development. Again, I'm not quite sure what that means. So maybe I'll plant a little flag here. According to one critic who specializes in the genre of autobiography, this departure from chronological ordering represents an important difference between autobiographies written by women and those traditionally written by men. Okay, so we are given this example of an autobiography that mixes genres. We're told an additional fact about it, additional point about it that's different from what you would expect, which is that it's not chronological. And then we're offered a critic's view on this book. The critic says, usually men write autobiographies that are chronological ordered, and this one's different. Okay. I guess I was hoping for the critic to help me out with this term, this bit over here about like, what does this mean? How do you arrange something by political development versus arranging it by chronology? But anyway, no help. Okay, let's keep going. So then we get, of course, the third example, which that shouldn't be surprising. They mentioned 3 books in paragraph 1. Now we know exactly why. Now it's like all 3 books get mentioned in paragraph 3. These like 1, 2, 3 books that were notable. We're talking about how each of them are notable. Getting Home Alive departs even further from the conventions of typical autobiography. Yes, all 3, of course, departs from typical autobiography. This like ties into a recurring theme on the LSAT when it comes to art passages. Every time you talk about art, whether it's painting, dance, architecture, here it's literature, it's got to be different. If it's just the conventional stuff, then yeah, there's no point talking about it. Like, of course, these 3 works did something new, did something different, did something that, that was good. So here, Getting Home Alive departs even further from the typical autobiography by bringing together voices, two people, a mother and her daughter. Right. Yes, I totally skipped over this bit, but up here, when they mentioned Getting Home Alive, there are 2 authors, Aurora Levins Morales and Rosario Morales. Right, so it's a book with 2 authors. Apparently, they're mother and daughter, and each of whom authors a portion of the text, a narrative and poem. So again, you see, you have this mix of genres. Narrative and poems of each author are not assigned a separate section of text, but rather woven together with a piece, and by one, sometimes commenting on a piece by another. So you have like lots of different things going on in the autobiography. And our author tells us, while this ordering may seem fragmentary and confusing, yes, it is in fact fully intentional and carefully designed experiment with literary structure. Okay. So again, it definitely departs from your typical conventions of what you just imagine what a simple, straightforward autobiography is. And that's what these 3 autobiographies depart from. In a sense, this mixing of structures parallels the content of these autobiographies. Okay. What does that mean? This mixing of structures. So we know that. We just talked about the mixing of the structures. Sometimes the mother writing, the daughter commenting on the mother's writing, sometimes a poem, it's a narrative. So yeah, okay, I get that. What do you mean parallels the content of the autobiography? What is the content of any autobiography? Well, the content of any autobiography is a person's life. Okay, so they're saying this structural mixing parallels the life of the people. The writers employ multi-generic and vocal, multivocal. So multi-generic is, again, the mixing of genres. Here, multivocal mixing of voices. So you have 2 voices, mother and daughter. So writers employ this and this forms to express the complexities inherent in the formation of their identities. Okay. So they're saying their identities, how their identities form was complex. Maybe there are lots of different components going into it. So they wanted that complexity to be reflected at the formal level in their autobiography. Okay. I don't know. That's kind of the best I can make of it. I'm still not quite sure what that means, but all right, let's keep going. We got at least at the end of the 3rd paragraph is I didn't specifically introduce subparagraph breaks, but I think you can see it's right here with with example 1, example 2, example 3. All really to support the idea that it's innovative, right? You believe me now, it's innovative. Yes, I do, because, we got into details and how they're innovative. So we have one more paragraph left. I'm not sure what the author's going to say here, but let's find out. So rather than forcing their personal histories to conform to existing generic parameters. Right, okay, so the existing generic parameters, meaning the existing parameters of the autobiography, in other words, the conventions typical of autobiography. So our author is saying, look, I suppose one thing these Latina authors could have done was to just take whatever the formal constraints are on autobiography and just shove their life stories into those formal constraints. They didn't do that though. They're like, no, I'm going to expand the formal constraints. Right? These writers have revolutionized the genre of autobiography, redrawing the boundaries of this literary form to make it more amenable to the expression of their own experiences. Right? So instead of shoving their lives into the formal constraints of, the standard conventional autobiography, they kind of expanded, right? They expanded what you expect an autobiography could be, so as to better accommodate their stories. And in so doing, they have shown a strong determination to speak for themselves in a world that they feel for too long has taken their silence for granted. So this is, at the end of it, this is where our author really comes out, and you hear our author's voice. Right? Our author says, this is good. It's good that they did that. It's important that they did that. Okay? And, if you want more high resolution on why the author seems to like it, seems to be endorsing it, well, you can read this sentence, right? Because they could have done something else, but they didn't, right? And in doing this in expanding, redrawing the boundaries of autobiography, they've done this other thing, which you can tell from the author's tone that the author approves. So we're at the end of the passage. Let's go ahead and run a low resolution thread. Starting from the first paragraph, we're given this is really, I think, the context. It's in the context of a proliferation of Latin American short stories, novels, poetry, that we get this autobiographical prominence of these three books. And then second paragraph says, hey, those books, really innovative in 1, 2, 3 ways. And then third paragraph focuses on the first book, how it's innovative, mixing genres. Second book, how it's innovative, mixing genres, and this thing about not chronologically arranged, but rather politically arranged, which, okay, whatever that means. And then third example, also mixing genres, but also mixing voices, right? You have a mother and daughter duo, and that their sort of kind of fragmentary and unconventional mixing of the structure parallels their sense of identity, their complex sense of identity. And then finally, the author just says, hey, this is great. They revolutionize autobiography, and in so doing, they've shown themselves to have a strong determination to speak. Okay, let's take a look at the questions.